Imagine being a literal sea monster, completely terrified of the surface world, but you want a shiny Italian scooter so badly that you're willing to strap yourself to a pile of junk, launch off a massive cliff, and just hope gravity takes a day off. That's exactly where we find two best friends, risking life, limb, and scales just to feel the wind in their hair. But what happens when you enter a seaside town famous for hunting monsters, and all it takes to reveal your true, terrifying identity is a single drop of rain? We open on a dark, misty night on the waters off the coast of Italy. Two human fishermen, Tommaso and Giacomo, are out on a small boat. Giacomo is nervous, wondering aloud if the old stories about sea monsters are actually true. Tommaso brushes it off, claiming they are just tall tales designed to keep people away from a prime fishing spot. But suddenly, a shadowy figure snatches their items right off the deck, terrifying the men and confirming that the monsters are, indeed, very real. Down below the surface, however, the monsters aren't exactly the terrifying beasts the fishermen think they are. Meet LUCA Paguro, a timid 13-year-old sea monster. LUCA lives a simple, somewhat boring life on a quiet, underwater farm. His daily chore consists of herding a flock of bleeding goatfish. LUCA's mother, Daniela, is fiercely protective and determined to keep her son safe from the human world. She constantly warns him that humans are only out there to do murders, and that he must always hide from boats. His father, Lorenzo, is a well-meaning but highly distracted dad, who is way more passionate about raising and grooming his prize-winning show crabs than keeping a close eye on his son. The only one who seems to understand LUCA's quiet rebellion is his grandma Paguro, who secretly knows that breaking the rules is just a part of growing up. LUCA's curiosity gets the better of him when he starts finding strange human artifacts dropped from boats, like an alarm clock, a wrench, and a playing card. While following a trail of these items, he encounters a strange figure in a diving suit. The figure takes off its helmet to reveal another sea monster kid, Alberto Scorfano. Alberto is a 14-year-old free spirit who is enthusiastic about the human world and completely fearless. When LUCA gets his herding staff hooked on Alberto's gear, Alberto simply drags LUCA out of the water and onto the dry shore. The moment LUCA breaches the surface, something magical happens. As the water drips off his scales, LUCA's body transforms into that of a human boy. LUCA is absolutely terrified, knowing he isn't supposed to be up there, and immediately scrambles back into the ocean. But the seed of curiosity has been planted. LUCA begins sneaking out to meet Alberto, blatantly defying his parents' strict orders. Alberto lives alone in an abandoned island tower, which serves as a makeshift lighthouse filled with human junk he has collected over the years. He teaches LUCA the basics of surviving on land. Since sea monsters aren't used to walking, Alberto explains that LUCA is experiencing phantom tail and just needs to put one foot in front of the other. Alberto introduces LUCA to the wonders of the surface world: air, gravity, the sky. Most importantly, the sun. But the crowning jewel of Alberto's collection is a poster of a Vespa. Alberto explains that the Vespa is the greatest thing humans ever made. Vespa is freedom, he tells LUCA, promising that it can take you anywhere in the whole stinkin' world. The boys quickly become best friends and decide they want to travel the world together. Since they can't buy a Vespa, they decide to build one out of scrap parts. During their test runs, which involve riding their rickety creation down a steep, rocky hill, LUCA is paralyzed by fear. Alberto teaches him a psychological trick to overcome his anxiety. Silenzio, Bruno. Alberto explains that everyone has a voice in their head, telling them they can't do things, or that they are going to die. By yelling, "Silenzio, Bruno!" LUCA learns to shut down his inner doubts. Emboldened, the boys launch their makeshift scooter off the cliff, soaring through the air in a moment of pure, terrifying joy. Unfortunately, LUCA's newfound freedom doesn't last. His parents discover that he has been sneaking off to the surface. They are horrified and decide that the only way to keep him safe is to send him to live in the deep ocean with his uncle Ugo. Uncle Ugo is a bizarre anglerfish-like sea monster who lives in the pitch-black depths. He has a transparent, see-through torso and talks endlessly about the joys of letting little pieces of whale carcass float into his mouth. Horrified by the prospect of spending a season, or 3, with Uncle Ugo, LUCA decides to run away from home. LUCA rushes back to Alberto, and the two decide to swim across the bay and hide in the nearby human town of Portorosso. They emerge from the water, carefully drying off to maintain their human disguises, and walk into the bustling Italian piazza. The town is filled with people, food, and danger. It doesn't take long for the boys to run afoul of the local tyrant, an 18-year-old named Ercole Visconti. Ercole is a cowardly bully, a pompadoured blowhard, who believes everyone loves him, and he happens to own a beautiful, shiny, red Vespa. Ercole is accompanied by his two loyal lackeys, Ciccio and Guido, who do his every bidding. When Ercole notices Luca staring at his Vespa, he immediately mocks the boys' strange, ragged clothes, joking that they must have gotten them from a dead body. Ercole decides to torment Luca, grabbing him and attempting to shove his face into the fountain for a little bath. Because water exposes their true sea monster forms, this is a life or death situation for Luca. Just in time, a young girl named Giulia Marcovaldo swoops in and stops Ercole. Giulia is a 13-year-old outcast in Portorosso, an outgoing and charming adventurer who despises Ercole. She calls him out on his bullying, reminding everyone that Ercole is a repeat champion of the town's famous Portorosso Cup race, even though he is technically too old to compete. Giulia storms off, and Luca and Alberto follow her. They learn that the Portorosso Cup is a grueling, traditional Italian triathlon consisting of swimming, cycling, and eating pasta. The winner gets a cash prize, which the boys realize could be used to buy a real Vespa. They beg Giulia to let them join her team, claiming they are underdogs just like her. Giulia, who usually races alone and previously failed because she couldn't stop throwing up, reluctantly agrees. The plan is set. Giulia will swim, Alberto will eat the pasta, and Luca will ride the bike. To afford the entry fee, Giulia takes the boys to her home and introduces them to her father, Massimo Marcovaldo. Massimo is a massive, imposing Italian fisherman and cook who was born with only one arm. He is highly intimidating to the boys, especially because he is armed with an array of sharp knives and harbors a deep prejudice against sea monsters. When Massimo slams a massive cleaver down on the cutting board, the boys are terrified. However, Massimo has a soft heart for his daughter. The boys secure a job helping Massimo catch fish to earn the entry fee, and Giulia allows them to sleep in her treehouse hideout. Meanwhile, Luca's parents, Daniela and Lorenzo, have infiltrated the surface town to find their missing son. They quickly realize that since all sea monsters look like humans on land, finding Luca will be incredibly difficult. Their hilariously chaotic solution is to randomly splash water on every kid they see in town, occasionally throwing local children directly into the public fountains, just to see if they turn into monsters. Back at the Marcovaldo house, training begins. The boys must master the grueling triathlon tasks. Alberto struggles immensely with the pasta eating portion. He desperately wants to eat with his hands, but the race rules strictly state that a fork must be used. Luca, meanwhile, has to learn how to expertly ride a bike up and down the incredibly steep hills of Portorosso. As they spend more time together, Luca and Giulia bond over a shared love of learning. One night, Giulia takes Luca onto the roof and lets him look through a telescope. She explains that the glowing lights in the sky aren't fish, as Alberto had claimed, but rather giant, raging balls of fire called stars. She tells him about the solar system, the planets, and the universe. Luca is absolutely mesmerized and begins to dream of attending a human school in Geneva with Giulia. Alberto grows intensely jealous of Luca and Giulia's newfound bond. Alberto wants things to stay the same, just him, Luca, and a Vespa, and he resents Luca's growing interest in the human world. Ercole and his gang show up to harass the trio, demanding they leave town. The tension finally boils over on the cliffs overlooking the sea. In a fit of jealousy and desperation, Alberto decides to sabotage Luca's dream of going to school. To prove that humans will never accept them, Alberto intentionally steps backward into the ocean, revealing his true sea monster form to Giulia. Giulia is absolutely terrified and screams. Ercole immediately rallies his goons to hunt Alberto down, throwing harpoons at him. Alberto looks at Luca, waiting for his friend to transform and stand by his side, but Luca, overwhelmed with panic and unwilling to give himself up, points at Alberto and feigns shock, yelling, "Sea monster!" Betrayed and heartbroken, Alberto plunges into the water and flees. Giulia, putting the pieces together, realizes that Luca is a sea monster as well. Fearing for his safety in a town of monster hunters, she tells him to leave Portorosso and go home. Refusing to give up, Luca sneaks back to Alberto's abandoned lighthouse to reconcile. Inside, he finds Alberto angrily tearing down the Vespa poster. Luca notices hundreds of tally marks carved into the wall. Alberto finally opens up, revealing his tragic backstory. He was abandoned by his father long ago. His dad just left one day, saying Alberto was old enough to be on his own. Alberto kept counting the days, hoping his father would change his mind and return, but he never did. Alberto tearfully admits he believes he is just a kid that ruins everything, and that humans will never accept them. Though Alberto refuses to participate in the race, LUCA stands his ground. He promises Alberto that he will win the race by himself, to buy the Vespa and rebuild their friendship. The day of the Portorosso Cup arrives. Since the team is split, LUCA must do the entire race alone, while Giulia competes separately. LUCA uses a vintage, heavy diving suit to hide his identity during the swimming portion. He manages to complete the swim and quickly devours the pasta using a fork, moving on to the final cycling leg of the race. But as they head up the steep mountain path, the sky darkens. It begins to rain. LUCA desperately tries to seek shelter under trees and awnings to avoid getting wet and exposing his scales. Just when things look bleak, Alberto suddenly appears, holding an umbrella to shield LUCA from the rain. But the vindictive Ercole pedals up beside him and aggressively kicks Alberto. Alberto crashes to the ground, losing the umbrella. The rain pours down on him, instantly exposing his true sea monster form to the shocked spectators and a horrified Ercole. Ercole gleefully commands Ciccio to grab a harpoon, ready to kill Alberto on the spot. Seeing his best friend in mortal danger, LUCA makes a choice. He pedals his bike straight out into the pouring rain, deliberately letting the water wash over him. He transforms into a sea monster in front of the entire town, revealing his own true form. LUCA grabs Alberto, hauls him onto the bike, and the two boys pedal furiously down the wet, winding streets toward the finish line, desperately trying to reach the safety of the sea. Ercole gives chase, brandishing a deadly harpoon. Just as Ercole is about to strike the boys, Giulia comes flying down the hill on her bike. She deliberately crashes into Ercole's bike, sacrificing her own race to stop him from hurting her friends. Giulia falls down hard, injuring herself badly. LUCA and Alberto are so close to the water, but when they look back and see Giulia hurt, they slam on the brakes, unintentionally skidding across the finish line in the process. The boys completely abandon the race and rush to Giulia's side. The townsfolk, including Ercole and his lackeys, quickly surround them with nets and harpoons. Ercole demands the crowd kill the monsters, insisting they are disgusting and horrified by their presence. But before anyone can act, Massimo steps forward. The massive, intimidating fisherman drops his weapon and defends the boys. He tells the crowd that these aren't monsters. They are LUCA and Alberto, and they had stopped to help his daughter. Massimo then points to the ground, noting that the boys had crossed the finish line. He declares them the official winners of the Portorosso Cup. The town realizes that the sea monsters mean them no harm. The humans accept the sea monsters, putting down their weapons. Even Ercole's abused henchmen, Ciccio and Guido, have finally had enough. When Ercole demands they attack, they completely ignore him and instead throw Ercole right into the town fountain. LUCA is finally reunited with his parents, Daniela and Lorenzo, who rush out of the crowd and embrace him, realizing that he is capable of surviving in the world. With their prize money, LUCA and Alberto finally buy their dream, an old, beat-up Vespa, but the story doesn't end there. In a beautiful act of selflessness, Alberto secretly sells the Vespa. He uses the money to buy a train ticket for LUCA, so that LUCA can go to school in Genova with Giulia. At the train station, emotions run high. LUCA's family, along with Massimo and Alberto, gather to see LUCA and Giulia off. LUCA is heartbroken to leave his best friend behind, but Alberto reveals that he is going to stay in Portorosso. Massimo has practically adopted Alberto as his own son, giving the lonely boy the father figure he always wanted. As the train pulls away, LUCA leans out the window, watching his family and his best friend fade into the distance. It rains, and LUCA transforms back into a sea monster form, finally at peace with who he is, and excited for the universe of possibilities ahead. In the end, LUCA is a beautifully crafted story about stepping out of your comfort zone, quieting the voices of doubt in your head, and realizing that true friendship means sacrificing your own dreams to help someone else achieve theirs. It teaches us that while the world can be scary, it's a lot easier to face when you've got people who accept you exactly as you are. All right, my brain is telling me to keep talking, but I'm telling it. Silenzio, Bruno, I'm heading out to find some gelato. Catch you in the next video. Don't let the land monsters get ya.